Long ago, in the legendary land of Erin, now known as Ireland, lived Prince Cuglas, master of the High King's hounds, responsible for leading the royal hunt. One day, as usual, Cuglas set out on the royal hunt in the morning. Before leaving the castle walls, he looked up and saw the beautiful Princess Ailinn watching him from her chamber window. They exchanged tender, silent glances. They clearly loved each other. Cuglas waved, and Ailinn, from the tower window, waved back discreetly, as if she sensed this might be the last time she'd see him leave. Cuglas then rode off on his black steed, followed by his loyal hounds. Erin was a land of green hills and shimmering rivers, where magic hid among the veils of the morning mist. In the forest, the prince spotted a dappled deer with a mystical appearance, which quickly fled through the ancient woods. Determined, Cuglas pursued the animal tirelessly until, suddenly, the deer dove into the mouth of a dark cave. The sound of hooves echoed like thunder through the cold, damp walls. Cuglas, clinging tightly to the reins, couldn't control his horse, which charged full speed through the dark tunnel. Cuglas could see nothing, only hear. The air grew denser, and cold water droplets fell from the stalactites, forming treacherous puddles that the horse splashed through violently, sending icy spray. The darkness seemed endless until, in the distance, a point of light appeared, at first faint, then bright. The sound of hooves began to fade, and suddenly Cuglas felt light flood his eyes. When he realized, he was in a vast, lush, and calm meadow, where the breeze blew gently and wildflowers gave off a sweet and comforting scent. The sky above him seemed bluer than any he had ever seen, as if he had crossed an invisible border into another world. As he recovered from the astonishment, a herald dressed in brown robes approached, bowing respectfully. The Prince Cuglas, master of Erin's hounds, is awaited at Queen Creed's court, sovereign of the floating isle. Not understanding what was happening, but driven by curiosity and royal etiquette, Cuglas followed the herald. They crossed a magnificent golden bridge that gleamed under the ethereal light of the new world. Upon stepping to the other side, Cuglas looked back and saw, astonished, the bridge slowly disappearing, as if it had never existed. The river, once narrow, was now wider and deeper, preventing any attempt to return. Soon they arrived at the shimmering palace where the fairy Queen Creed awaited, seated on thrones of crystal and ivory. She was of unmatched beauty, with eyes that sparkled like stars and hair that flowed like silver waterfalls. Queen Creed revealed she had known Cuglas for a long time, having observed him during his hunts in her fairy form, and confessed that she loved him deeply. Hearing these words, he was shaken by her beauty, but then looked at the bracelet Princess Ailinn had given him on the day she promised him her hand in marriage. He also remembered it was a magical bracelet, crafted by Scandinavian elves, and that whoever wore it would forever remember who gave it to them, and no spell could remove it from their arm. However, if they loved another, the bracelet would fall off and could never be closed again. In hopes of winning him over, Creed prepared splendid banquets, fantastic parties, and legendary hunts, trying to distract him from his longing, and he accepted out of royal courtesy. But at night, alone in his chambers, Prince Cuglas would stare at the bracelet in deep sadness, thinking of Ailinn and of Erin. One of those lonely nights, a small fairy entered his room stealthily. With a gentle voice and a knowing gaze, she said, "You were thinking about Princess Ailinn, weren't you? Because of that love, and also because I was a friend of her mother's, I will help you. I'll tell you exactly what you must do to escape from here. By the lake's shore, a boat awaits you. It will take you back to your homeland and into Ailinn's arms. But no matter what happens, do not draw your sword, or you will be brought back forever." The prince left the palace and descended to the lake, where he saw a gleaming boat before him. He boarded, and the boat glided silently under the moonlight until he finally saw the mainland and a winding path extending from the shore. His heart filled with joy. But suddenly, the moon's milky glow vanished, and looking up at the sky, he saw the moon turn blood red. The waters, once silvery, took on a crimson hue, and a violent wind stirred the lake's surface, tossing the boat from side to side. While Cuglas was still marveling at the change, he heard a strange, unearthly noise ahead, and a monster emerged from the depths, raising its claws. In an instant, it surfaced beside the boat and slashed at the prince, injuring his arm. Overcome by pain, Cuglas drew his sword and severed the monster's claw with a precise blow. The creature vanished beneath the water, and as it did, the lake once again shimmered under the moonlight. But the boat no longer headed to the mainland. Caught by magical currents, it swiftly returned to the floating isle, where a fleet of ferry boats found it, led by the queen's own vessel. Without a word, she greeted the prince as if unaware of his escape attempt and said, "Out for a moonlight ride?" To the sound of harps, she led him back to the palace. Alone in his room the next night, the fairy appeared once more and told him, "Yesterday you failed, but today I came to give you another chance. Tomorrow morning the queen will go to Erin, but she cannot take you, for if you set foot on its green lands, she will no longer be able to bring you back. When she leaves tomorrow, go to the throne room and descend through the hidden trapdoor. I don't know what dangers you'll face, but no matter what happens, accept nothing from anyone." Confident, the next morning, Cuglas went to the throne room after the queen had departed and found the trapdoor. Descending the stairs, he found himself in a dark, desolate valley. He set off through the misty veil under moonlight. Gradually, the mist grew so dense it completely covered the moon, plunging him into darkness. Then, an absolute silence fell, as thick as the fog, and it chilled his heart with fear. A thunderclap shattered the silence, and in the lightning's flash he saw ghostly figures appear. 100 ethereal wraiths floating toward him, emitting murmurs and screams so terrifying that he longed for the silence again. Desperate, he drew his sword and began swinging it in front of him, afraid of failing again, as he had in the previous trial. Then the specters vanished with the fog, and the sun magically shone bright, like a summer day. With renewed courage, Cuglas continued through the valley until he reached a scorching desert. The sands, hot as embers, burned his body, and his tongue stuck to his palate. When thirst overcame him, an oasis sprang forth ahead, but as he approached, it vanished in the heat. Thirsty and exhausted again, he pressed on until the desert's end, where a green hill rose and upon it rested a beautiful fairy offering a crystal chalice overflowing with fresh, clear water. Unable to resist, Cuglas raised the chalice and drank before stepping on the grass. Immediately the thirst vanished, but so did the desert, the fairy, and the hill. And turning around, he found himself once again in the woods behind the queen's palace. Once more, the prince lamented alone in his room, waiting for the small golden fairy. But she didn't appear. When he had lost hope, she arrived and said, "You were so close and failed again. I can give you just one more chance. Listen carefully. Tomorrow when you go hunting with the queen, separate from the group and go to the lake shore. Once there, take this dagger and throw it toward Erin. A golden bridge will appear, leading you to your goal, but again, do not draw your sword, or you'll be trapped here forever." The next day, he followed her instructions, and upon reaching the shore, he hurled the dagger over the water. A golden bridge rose toward the mainland. His horse galloped boldly across the shining arc when, halfway through, a champion appeared, wearing a silver helm, silver shield on his left arm, and wielding a gleaming sword. As he approached, the warrior struck his shield and challenged Cuglas to battle. The prince, honor on the line, charged with a war cry and with a single blow split the silver helm, causing the champion to fall in the middle of the bridge. Satisfied, Cuglas spurred his steed to pass the fallen man, but the horse refused to go forward, and the bridge broke in two at his feet. The section between him and the mainland sank into the lake, taking with it the horse and the champion. Before he could react, his steed turned back and raced away until he could only stop it at the palace door. For days, Cuglas grieved and each night waited for the fairy who never came. The queen saw him and felt sorry. Days later, Cuglas, watching the lake at night, met the small golden fairy again. With sorrow, he said, "I failed another test, and now I'm doomed to live here. But if I refuse the duel, I'd be ashamed before Erin's nobles and never feel worthy of Aelin." She replied, "Cheer up, you're in the greenest land there is. It may feel lonely, but not for long." He answered with sadness and resolve, "Do you think I'd trade Aelin's love for that of the fairy queen?" The little fairy just smiled and said she'd be in that same place a week from now. Meanwhile, in the kingdom of Erin, Princess Aelin lay wasting away in her bed, consumed by sadness and her beloved's absence. Her parents, the king and queen, tried to console her, but she only stared out the window, waiting for a return that never came. Until one night, a bright light flooded her room, and magical music filled the air. In the blink of an eye, Princess Aelin vanished. The king and queen, weeping, whispered, "The fairies have taken her." Back on the floating isle, Cuglas waited patiently by the lake. At the end of a week, he saw a magnificent vessel approaching, drifting without oars, guided by magic. From the boat disembarked Queen Creed, the little fairy, and, to his astonishment and joy, Princess Aelin. Queen Creed, with tears in her eyes, said, "I love you so much I couldn't bear to see you sad, so I brought your beloved to you." Cuglas bowed respectfully, thanking the queen for her generosity and the little fairy for her loyalty. Thus, Cuglas and Aelin lived happily in that enchanted land where there is no sickness, no aging, no sorrow. And they say that, to this day, those who walk the forests of Erin may hear the echo of forgotten hounds, forever running in search of their master. If you enjoyed this Irish tale, I invite you to subscribe to the channel, like this video so it reaches more people, and turn on the bell to hear many other wonderful legends and stories. Until next time.